If you told me you wanted to change your financial life in 1 year, I would not begin by asking what stock you should buy. I would ask a much more uncomfortable question: what are you willing to place second? That is where the whole thing starts. Most people do not stay financially average because they lack dreams. They stay financially average because they refuse to put a single aim above everything that weakens it. They want progress without hierarchy. They want better outcomes without a season of organized obsession. They want to improve their income while protecting every habit, every comfort, every identity marker, every social rhythm, and every distraction that belongs to the version of them they say they want to outgrow. That does not work. I have spent most of my life around businesses, capital allocation, markets, incentives, and the strange emotional machinery people bolt onto money. The older I get, the less impressed I become by advice that flatters the ego, and the more I respect structure. A year is enough time to make a surprising amount of progress. It is also short enough that you cannot keep pretending everything matters equally. If you want a real change in income, not a slightly better month, not one lucky break, but a structural change in what you can earn, then for a period of time something must become primary. That is not dramatic language. That is the arithmetic of focus. The first thing I would buy is seriousness, not motivation, not a burst of enthusiasm after hearing a good speech. Seriousness. A person becomes serious when he stops treating his desired future as one item in a crowded emotional menu and starts treating it like a military objective. That means certain things go quiet, not forever, for a season. You do not need every dinner. You do not need every opinion. You do not need to keep proving that you are relaxed, available, socially current, and easygoing while trying to build a life that requires concentrated force. That is one of the great lies told to ambitious people, that you can transform everything while protecting the entire old rhythm. No, if the objective matters, then the calendar changes. That is what seriousness looks like. A wartime calendar. If a thing makes money, builds the skill that will make money, or preserves the body and mind that must carry the effort, it stays. If not, it gets questioned. I know that sounds severe. Good. Financial change usually begins with a season that looks severe to people who are not trying to escape the same ceiling you are trying to escape. The public always wants the payoff without respecting the compression required before the payoff becomes possible. This is why I tell people that the first price they pay is not cash. It is embarrassment. Embarrassment tolerance is one of the most underpriced assets in all of business. If you can survive looking uncertain, unimportant, underappreciated, small, or slightly ridiculous for a year, you can build things most people keep postponing forever. That is not poetry. It is one of the clearest patterns I have ever seen. Most people do not fail because the plan was impossible. They fail because they needed to look competent during the ugly middle. That is fatal. The ugly middle is the path. The ugly middle is where the beginner sends the first cold message, creates the first bad offer, lands the first tiny client, posts the first awkward piece of content, does work that feels beneath him, charges too little, learns too late, fixes the process, and keeps moving anyway. That is how money changes, not through one giant moment of public triumph, through a chain of small humiliations survived long enough to become competence. So the first thing I would do is choose one scoreboard, not 10-1. A person who says, I want to get better with money, has already failed to define the game. A person who says by the end of this year, I want a month where $10,000 came in from my own production, is at least speaking in a language the mind can work with. The number itself can vary. The principle should not. You need one visible target, one metric that makes the year concrete. Not because the number is sacred, because vagueness is one of the most expensive luxuries in finance. A vague goal lets a man drift and still call it trying. A clear target exposes drift for what it is. Once the scoreboard exists, the next move is not action, it is education. Now, here is where the public becomes arrogant without noticing it. It wants results without fundamentals. It wants to sell before it understands value. It wants to advertise before it understands attention. It wants clients before it understands offers. It wants a business before it understands leverage. That is childish. One of the great advantages of modern life is that the basic mechanics of value creation have already been written down by people who paid dearly to learn them. Yet the average person prefers 10 hours of scattered online noise to one serious pass-through material that has already compressed years of error into a few hundred pages. I have no patience for that. You do not become wise by skimming whatever is loudest this week. You become useful by building a body of understanding you can return to when mood disappears. The books matter less than the categories. You need one body of thought that teaches leverage and long horizon thinking. You need one that teaches the true volume of effort required when results are still invisible. You need one that teaches the difference between a business and a job. You need one that teaches how to craft an offer people will actually buy. And you need one that teaches how systems beat mood. That is enough to begin, not because reading makes money, because it corrects the arrogance of improvisation. The person who refuses fundamentals is not bold. He is expensive. Now, once the mind has the rough map, the next step is not dreaming. It is inventory. What do you already have? Most people leap over this because inventory sounds too simple. Again, that is why it matters. What tools do you possess? What assets? What raw abilities? What existing audience? What technical knowledge? What reputation? What industry access? What software familiarity? What editing ability? What writing? What sales ability? What operational discipline? What design sense? What contacts? What licenses? What lived experience inside a painful problem that other people would pay to escape? All of that counts. The world trains people to think only in credentials. The market often pays for combinations. A person who can write, film, edit, and sell is different from a person who can only write. A person who understands a trade and can market it is different from a person who only understands the trade. A person who can automate, organize, and communicate clearly is more valuable than the person who is merely smart in isolation. This is why inventory matters. Wealth is often built by stacking what already exists inside you in a more valuable arrangement. Now, the biggest mistake at this stage is choosing a passion instead of choosing a money skill. Passion is beautiful when it survives contact with economics. It is dangerous when used as a substitute for economics. The question is not, what do you enjoy in a pure emotional sense? The question is, what skill sits close enough to revenue that the market pays for it repeatedly? Sales, copy-paid acquisition, appointment setting, video editing tied to commerce, design tied to conversion, automation, closer work, lead generation, client fulfillment in a high-paying category. These types of skills get paid because they sit near the artery. That is the principle. The market pays more for things near money. It pays less for things far away from it, even when those things are respectable, intellectually admirable, or emotionally rewarding. That sounds harsh. It is simply how the world prices urgency. So if a person wants to transform his income inside a year, he should not begin with the skill that flatters his self-image most. He should begin with the skill that moves money most directly. Now, once the skill is chosen, an even bigger misunderstanding appears. People think choosing the skill is progress. It is not. Practicing the skill until the market has no choice but to notice is progress. Watching videos is not practice. Saving posts is not practice. Talking about what you are learning is not practice. Practice is repetition under pressure. Replication, feedback, correction. Again. This is what adults forget. Because modern life has created a soft fantasy that it is not. The person who wants to be paid weekly for a skill must force himself into the discomfort of using it every day before he feels ready. That is how capability appears, not when readiness arrives. Readiness usually appears after repetition, not before it. This is why I tell people to move quietly at first. Do not tell everyone what you are doing. This is not about being mysterious. It is about protecting a fragile phase. Early ambition is soft, not morally soft, structurally soft. The first version of your offer is weak. The first version of your pitch is clumsy. The first version of your confidence is borrowed. If you expose that phase to too much social commentary from people who have never built anything like what you want to build, you often lose momentum for stupid reasons. Friends and family usually do not oppose you because they are evil. They oppose you because your attempt changes the emotional agreement of the group. If you act, they feel their inaction more clearly. That is uncomfortable. So they call it concern. Fine. Do not make enemies of them. Just do not take structural advice from people whose financial life you would not willingly trade into. This is one of the most useful rules I know. Most people take advice from familiarity. They should take it from evidence. Evidence matters if the person has never sold, built, marketed, scaled, negotiated, or converted skill into meaningful ownership. Then he may still love you and be completely unqualified to guide this year of your life. That is why silence helps. Silence protects the seed phase. Now, if you are going to grow, you need more than silence. You need proximity. This is where the average person remains criminally passive. He sits in the same environment and expects a different result. He talks to the same people, consumes the same conversations, visits the same places, then complains that his mind does not stretch. No, environment is not everything. It is far too important to ignore. If your current environment had enough nutrients to produce what you want, you would already see more evidence of that outcome around you. This is why I tell people to get closer to money, not in the mystical sense. Events, workshops, industry meetups, communities, mentors, people doing the thing, not influencers performing the thing, people actually doing it. The gap between a person who spends a year close to competence and a person who spends a year near ordinary drift is enormous. Exposure matters because it normalizes action. The more you see how value is really made, how sales really happen, how offers are shaped, how follow-up works, how calm, competent people price, close, and deliver, the less mysterious the whole world becomes. Mystery is expensive. Proximity reduces mystery. That is worth paying for. If you have money, buy feedback. If you do not, buy humility and go where the information is free. Both work better than staying where you are and calling the internet a full substitute for contact with real operators. Now we reach the place where most people either step into adulthood or stay theoretical forever. You choose a customer who is already spending. This sounds too obvious. It is one of the most ignored truths in business. Do not begin by selling to people who have no money and no habit of buying. That path exhausts idealists and enriches very few. Money is made fastest when you solve painful problems for people or businesses already conditioned to pay for solutions. Dentists, law firms, clinics, real estate teams, home service businesses, creators with real revenue, local operators, sales organizations. The exact niche can vary. The principle cannot. You want money already moving, not a noble fantasy about what the market should reward someday. Then you write the simplest offer you can. One sentence if possible. I helped this kind of customer get this measurable result in this time frame without this pain. That is enough to begin. The reason most people stay broke is that they create complexity before proof. They want the brand identity, the business cards, the legal paperwork in perfect order, the trademark, the full content library, the polished system. No, first get paid. Adults understand the right order. Proof first. Polish later, which brings us to the next crucial move. Make the first $100 from a stranger. I do not care if the margin is poor at first. I do not care if the first project teaches you more than it pays you. I do not care if it feels unimpressive. Stranger money changes the psychology of the whole game. Friends and family can flatter you. A stranger paying is evidence. Evidence matters more than encouragement. Once someone unknown gives you money, a new fact exists in the world. You have moved from theory to commerce. That fact is heavier than all the self-belief speeches in the world. Now, once that first payment comes in, another adult step appears immediately. Document the result. Not because you need to brag, because proof reduces fear in future buyers. Every buyer is asking some version of the same question. Can you really do this? You answer that question with evidence, not adjectives. Show a screenshot, a metric, a testimonial, a timeline, a result. Now, your offer is no longer resting on your energy. It is resting partly on proof. That is a major shift, and once proof exists, you build a place where the proof can live. This is where distribution begins. Most people are far too lazy or too embarrassed about distribution. They want to hide from it because hiding preserves the fantasy that their work would explode if only the world were fairer. No. If the world does not know you exist, it cannot buy from you. Distribution is not vanity, it is oxygen. Choose one channel. This is another place where ambition gets destroyed by ego. People try to dominate 5 platforms badly instead of one platform. Well, they want omnipresence before they have proof of concept. That is juvenile. One channel, 1 year, daily activity, loud enough repetition that the right people stop being able to miss you. This can be outbound content, email, paid traffic, a community. It does not matter at first which one flatters your personality most. It matters which one reaches your customer consistently enough that the pipeline stops depending on luck. The first half of your day should sell. The second half should fulfill, not the other way around. That is a law for anyone in the early stage. If you fulfill all day and market only when you are desperate, the business becomes a feast and famine machine. That pattern traps people for years. They have income. They do not have control. Control begins when you realize marketing is not what you do after the work. It is what makes the work possible. Now, once demand begins, outgrowing your ability to fulfill it. Personally, the next adult move appears, you hire. But you hire in the right order, not a co-founder because you feel lonely, not a dramatic full-time team because you want to look official. You hire the boring repetition, the part of the work that steals selling time but does not require your highest judgment. This is another place where otherwise intelligent people destroy themselves. They hire image before they hire leverage. They bring on titles, meetings, complexity, and fixed costs before the unit economics deserve them. No, start with contractors. Start part-time. Start with the tasks that repeat and do not need your brain every time. Your job remains sales, problem-solving, quality control, system refinement, and more hiring, if the math supports it. This is where money finally begins decoupling from your exact hours. Not fully enough. Enough is how systems start. Then you do something else most people avoid because it feels too grown up. You productize. No more custom chaos if it can be avoided. No more pricing opacity for things that should be standardized. No more inventing the wheel for each new client, just so you can feel special. Standard offers, anchored pricing. Simple choice architecture. One option that feels affordable, one that most people should take, one premium option for people who want speed, certainty, or status. That is how adults sell. Not by hiding the number and saying, "Message me." Message me for pricing is often just fear hiding behind mystique. And fear is expensive. Once the offer is clear, the next level begins. You stop extracting all the cash and start reinvesting like a sane fanatic. This is another line where the average person reveals whether he wants wealth or just the performance of momentum. At the start, revenue is not yours, not emotionally at least. Revenue is fuel, cash is oxygen. The money left inside the machine can buy speed, capacity, quality, or certainty. The money taken out too early usually gets converted into lifestyle. Lifestyle is one of the most elegant killers of young businesses ever invented. At the start, the machine wants better tools, better systems, better process, cleaner onboarding, cleaner contracts, better follow-up, better production quality, more reliable fulfillment, and eventually more capable people. You do not need to spend wildly. You do need to stop treating the first visible success like permission to upgrade your whole identity. That is how compounding gets strangled in the crib. I would rather the machine look strong than I look rich. That one decision changes decades. Then once the system has some consistency, you begin studying where the real money is in the industry. Not the public money, the real money. That means you stop asking, "How do I get more clients?" like a beginner, and start asking, "Where is the value actually created? Who controls it? Where are the margins? How is arbitrage happening? How is ownership layered? And what separates the whales from the well-intentioned workers?" This is where your mind has to become more strategic. The wealthy in almost every industry understand some form of arbitrage. They buy something relatively cheap and sell something relatively expensive. After adding value, packaging, distribution, trust, or control, they understand leverage, ownership, distribution, compounding, relationships. This is the adult language of money. Poor people ask, "How do I make more?" Rich people ask, "Where is the value created and who owns it?" That is a completely different operating system. Now, once you see how the big money works, another temptation appears. Reinvention. The person gets a little success and suddenly believes he should pivot into something totally new because the new thing looks shinier. This is one of the dumbest habits in modern business. People abandon functioning systems because novelty flatters them more than repetition. Wealth is usually built by doing more of what already works, not by constantly escaping into new fantasies. You improve the existing machine. You tighten the niche. You raise certainty. You increase quality. You add recurring structures. You add premium layers. You negotiate performance components. You build referral engines. You deepen the profitable pattern instead of running from it. Then finally we come to the last piece. Scale through volume of what already works, not through reinvention. Business is not art at this stage. It is manufacturing inputs, process outputs. If demand is the constraint, fix demand. If delivery is the constraint, fix delivery. But stop pretending the answer is some romantic new idea every week. That is the habit of amateurs. Professionals scale the profitable pattern. Now, I want to say something important about timing because the culture lies viciously here. If you do this seriously, you may make money inside a year. You may not feel powerful inside a year. Those are different things. It may take several years before you feel it. It may take longer still before outsiders call the progress obvious. That is normal. The public uses the phrase overnight success because it does not want to study the long night before the morning. Do not let that disturb you. Time passes either way. The only useful question is whether the time will pass while you are building structure or while you are maintaining drift. That is why I like this framework so much. Not because it is practical, focus, education, inventory, a money skill, silence, proximity, a buyer with budget, proof distribution, hiring the boring work, packaging, reinvestment, understanding where the real margin lives, scaling what works. That sequence is not glamorous. It is still one of the most dependable paths I know for taking a normal person from dependence toward control. And that is the whole aim, not just more income control. Control over what you can earn. Control over where the opportunities come from. Control over whether money arrives only when you show up personally, or whether a machine is finally working alongside you. That is what changes a life, not a better month, not a viral moment, not a lucky spike, a machine. Build that, and your future stops looking like a negotiation with your current limitations. Ignore it, and you may spend years being capable, motivated, and still stuck. That is the blunt version. I prefer blunt versions. They waste less time.